up, Philadelphia? Welcome back to First Time, Long Time. I'm Colin Nubia, 97.5 The Fanatic and 93.3 WMMR. Coming to you weekly, for now, with the Philly Sports Talk podcast. This is episode 9, and we're rolling in the guests now. We got John Kincade coming up, morning show host at 97.5 The Fanatic, a sports radio vet going for decades. First, we're going to start it off with some September Phillies conversation, though.
Nobody's waving a flag or anything, but can you talk about what a difference it would be to go in as a division titleist instead of a wild card?
Well, that's the goal, you know. I mean, the first goal is to get in, and the second goal is to win the division, and it just makes life a little bit easier, especially if you're, one of the top two teams. And playing in this building is very important to us because we play better because of all the support from our fan base. So that's a huge goal.
That's Rob Thompson talking to the media last week about how the Phillies want to utilize the rest of the season, what their goals are, how they're happy about kind of burying the Atlanta Braves. The Mets are actually in second place now. But what they've accomplished and what they hope to accomplish from here to the finish line. And everything Rob Thompson said has merit. I've heard so many people talk about the home field advantage at Citizens Bank Park. It's local, yeah, so there's some bias, but so many national people say it constantly that I absolutely believe it, and I do think it's almost like a football atmosphere at a baseball game. The Red October crowd is absolutely wild. You've seen it the past 2 years. You saw it back in 2007 through 2011 when all those teams were going on deep playoff runs. But is it all it's cracked up to be? Is it the deciding factor in a game? And is it the top priority? I don't know if it is, no matter what Rob Thompson might say. The Phillies have a comfortable lead in the NL East. It looks like they're going to win this division. It would take extreme circumstances. Yeah, I know they have 7 games left against the New York Mets. Back in 2007, well, there was a lot of irony there, and unless it's a direct converse situation, the Phillies are going to snap the Atlanta Braves streak of consecutive division championships and win the crown in 2024. Then their attention turns to getting the bye. They have a lead right now on the Milwaukee Brewers. I think that's the most important. They're neck and neck with the Dodgers for the top seed in the National League, but I think it's important to get one of the top 2 because that secures the bye in the first round of the postseason. The MLB playoffs in the last couple of years, they've added this 3-game wild card series at the beginning. The Phillies have played in it twice. They've swept both times, 2-0. The likelihood of that happening again, well, it's really not that high. And if you enter that 3-game wild card series right to open the postseason, you can get an early exit. It's just the way that baseball playoffs work. It can be fluky, especially in a shorter series. Just because it hasn't happened in the last 2 years doesn't mean it's not going to happen this year. And I think the likelihood is just so high that Major League Baseball starts to get more upsets in that first series. So if you can stay clear of the Brewers, and they have a 3-game series left with them, out in Milwaukee, that is September 16th through 18th. If the Phillies stay competitive in that series, and by competitive, I mean they don't get swept, I think they're staying ahead of the Milwaukee Brewers in the National League standings. That would mean that the top 2 division winners, the Phillies and more than likely the LA Dodgers, are going to get the byes. And also, if you get the top seed in the National League, I don't think AL teams like the Yankees or the Orioles are going to catch up and get the best record in baseball either. So that would leave the Phillies and the Dodgers as the competitors for that overall number 1 seed and home field advantage all the way throughout the postseason. It's an exciting talking point right now to think about Shohei Ohtani and to think about Dodger Stadium and the allure. And if those 2 teams get to an NLCS, a Phillies-Dodgers matchup like you had back in 2008 and 2009, That's going to be a great storyline for baseball. They look like the two best teams in the National League. They have the two best records in baseball at the time I'm recording. So why isn't home field advantage for that potential NLCS matchup so important? I really don't think it is. Think about the 2022 and 2023 playoffs. You had the NL East and the NL West kind of line up with each other. The Phillies played the Braves in the NLDS both years. The Braves were the division champs, the Phillies were the wild card, but the Phillies beat them both times. Both times when they went to the NLCS, they played NL West teams that had also upset the Dodgers, who were division winners both times also. I feel like because it unfolded so cleanly, and you had the Phillies making that run in 22 and 23, the Padres in 22, the D-backs in 23, there might be this assumption that an East team is going to play a West team in the NLCS. It's more likely that they don't face each other. So in September, as the Phillies are coming down the stretch here, are they going to prioritize home field advantage over the health of their team? I just don't think that they are. It's possible that they play the Dodgers in the NLCS. It's probably even the most likely matchup, but I don't think that it's worth exhausting the September effort and possibly costing yourself some valuable rest. Look at something more important. Right now, you've got Alec Boehm, JT Realmuto, Austin Hayes, Edmundo Sosa, all out of the lineup. You've got Bryce Harper dealing with something. We're not really sure the extent of that. I don't think it's ever really going to come out, at least not until after the Phillies are done with the 2024 season. But you need to get these guys healthy. Line up regulars like Boehm and Realmuto, a rotational player like Hayes. You need Ranger Suarez ramped up too. You need the bullpen rested. Think about Monday night's game against the Rays. Carlos Estevez blew the save in the 9th inning. The Phillies had to plan for extras at that point. Guess who they had up in the pen? Jose Ruiz. Matt Strahm was sitting there with 3 full days rest, and they didn't go to Strahm. They were going to go to Ruiz. They ended up winning it in a walk-off fashion in the 9th inning, so this didn't actually come up. But think about that. Rob Thompson would rather put in Jose Ruiz than Matt Strahm, a National League All-Star this year, who's been one of the most reliable relief pitchers in Major League Baseball. So Rob Thompson's saying one thing, however, I'm not all that sure that he fully means it. And a manager is going to give that message to a team that we want to win every game. Of course you do. There is seeding on the line, and seeding would be, I think, a minimal advantage in that NLCS if it does actually come up. Sure, you would love to play at Citizens Bank Park. That crowd's wild. We've seen it before. But go back to June 5th to be exact. I pulled an old quote from Rob Thompson, and I've got the audio here. This is from June 5th when the Phillies were 44-19, and Rob Thompson spoke postgame. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Rob, is there anything that you're worried about?
Health. I'm always worried about health. Players win games, and they got to be on the field to be able to do it, so I'm always worried about that.
Worried about health. You're the best team in baseball, but you always have to worry about health. Rob Thompson said pretty much the same thing in the dugout during his pregame availability on Monday. Sure enough, after he said that back in June, they go on that London trip. Then they put JT Realmuto on the IL. He had a midseason surgery. They said, get it now. Be ready for the late season stretch run. Be ready for the playoffs. It wasn't long after that Ranger Suarez went on the IL. He had a little back issue that kept him out from one start initially. Soon it kind of trickled down. They called it back spasms. He missed over a month. I think it was about 5 weeks between starts that he had. But point being, the Phillies have had their eyes on October all year, and the messaging has been pretty consistent from the entire organization. I know Rob Thompson's saying they're focused on home field advantage, but what's he going to say? I'm looking at their actions instead. And he also mentioned a case-by-case basis on Monday, which is very important. I think you can't really lump all of these injuries into one circumstance. You have to treat each player differently. But I really think the Phillies would be happy if they get their pitching staff rested and get these lineup regulars off the IL by the end of September, as long as they avoid the 3 seed. I don't think they really need that 1 seed. I don't think they need to beat the LA Dodgers to enter the postseason to get into Red October with full confidence. Phillies fans who are sitting here listening to this, disagreeing with me, I get why. You probably want them to put the foot on the gas, avoid complacency. Yeah, it's a logical idea, but I need to make you a deal right now. Answer this question honestly and see if you still disagree with what I'm saying. See how you feel afterwards. Do you really think that the Dodgers, in a 7-game series in the NLCS with games 1 and 2 at Dodger Stadium, would still have the upper hand if the Phillies have their top 4 starters right in a row, ready to fire in the first 4 games, no matter what venue they're playing in? Do the Dodgers have the advantage if the Phillies have Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, and Christopher Sanchez against a banged-up Dodgers rotation? A rotation that's had a ton of injuries all year, and we don't know if it's going to be in great shape by the time they reach the NLCS, if they get there. If you can answer that question, I'll take your point about home field advantage. But I think the Phillies' confidence level should be through the roof as long as they do get those guys rested. They get them properly lined up to pitch in the postseason and maximize their potential odds from winning a World Series. But now let's take a break before we get to the John Kincade interview. And this was great stuff. John talked about the roots of Philadelphia sports radio. He started working at WIP decades ago when Angelo Cataldi was first making a name for himself even, and he brought that up in the interview. But my favorite part of this, the way he answered my go-to sports radio prompt. And you'll hear me ask every sports radio guest that question from now on. It's going to be my new go-to prompt. Pick one team from any era of that franchise, look back on how that era captivated Philadelphia and your memory, and tell the story of that era the way you remember it. And my personal answer, I didn't even have to say it. John Kincade brought it up himself. Catch it on the other side of the break.
If it's happening in Philly sports, Colin Newby's talking about it. Go with him behind the scenes of legendary sports venues with the best athletes and the most iconic media personalities of the greatest sports city in the world.
What's up, Philadelphia? Welcome back to First Time, Long Time. And we have a special guest in studio. It's John Kincade from the 97.5 The Fanatic morning show, Kincade and Salciunas. How you doing today, John?
I'm doing well there, Colin. What's up, buddy?
Not too much. Thanks for coming on today. We appreciate the time. So, John, you have a ton of experience in sports radio, and that's what I consider the sounding board of this area, going back a long time. You got some stories of wild personalities in Philly sports radio, and it's persisted through different eras of Philadelphia sports. Just how important is sports radio to the nature of local fandom and the way Philadelphia sports fans look at the game?
I think it's changed a lot, Colin, since the days that I interned at WIP when it was in its infancy. When Tom Brookshire used to do the morning show with Angelo Cataldi, Brookie and the Rookie, from the days of early infancy sports radio when there were only 2 sports radio stations in the entire country, WFAN and WIP. And so I've seen the industry grow from the beginning, and I've watched how 2 cities, New York and Philly, sort of cultivated it. New York, much more homeristic. Philadelphia, much more critical. And I think that the early trailblazers of sports radio in this town, the Howard Eskins, the Angelo Cataldis, the Mike Missinellis, who's part of our family, they created a industry that was many, many times based on what was the controversial part of that day, which then brings critique, then brings a little bit of anger and juice. And so it's always been, I think, an important venting point, because once people are given a stage to do something like that, they get addicted to it. They feel like they're being heard. And believe me this, every player, every coach, every general manager in this town or any other major sports city that tells you they aren't listening to sports radio, they're not paying attention to it, they're lying through their teeth.
Which gives us a great segue, you saying how it's changed over the years. It's probably a generational thing in a lot of ways. There's differences in the mentality that you saw when Buddy Ryan coached the Eagles at the Vet. What sticks out to you most about how things have changed since the times you're talking about? What year did you start at WIP?
I started interning in 1990.
Okay, so right around that Buddy Ryan era that we're talking about.
And it was golden. I mean, the excitement in this town for Buddy Ryan was great, only because of the fact that except for a short blip of time, 3 or 4 years of the Dick Vermeil era, this city was used to losing football. And Buddy Ryan brought an attitude and an identity to the franchise, but what he didn't bring was playoff winning. And the thing is, you will still hear guys in my age group, 50s, 60s, 70s, that will say, oh, that Buddy Ryan era was great. I throw up in my mouth a little every time I hear that, because to me, it involved no winning. Whereas the Andy Reid era then changed things, because we finally started to consume football as a fan base that said, we got a chance. We got a chance to win this thing. And then it carried over to all the coaches that have followed Andy Reid, in that they've each had at least a window of opportunity to do something in the playoffs. I think that spoils a fan base. I think that makes a fan base less angry. And I think, Colin, when I look at your generation, I think the guys who are in 20s and 30s, I think they consume sports differently than their fathers did, than their uncles did, grandfathers did. I think you guys have been silver spoon kids. You've had a much better Philadelphia sports upbringing than I had, than my father had, than my grandfather had. And so there's a lot less anger. There's a lot less venom. There's a lot more of, that was a pretty good year. We didn't win anything, but it was a pretty good year. Whereas previous generations felt when they had a chance to win something, they better do it. There was a lot more desperation.
Well, it's kind of scary that you put it that way, because I'll give you my example answer to the sports radio question of this podcast. But first, I'll ask you without knowing the answer.
Okay.
Pick one team from any era of that franchise. Could be 5 years, maybe 10, or maybe even 1 year if you really want it to be. But look back on how that era captivated Philadelphia and your memory, and just tell the story of that era the way you remember it. What's the first one that comes up?
I think the first one that comes to mind is the 2002 Eagles, because 1999, Andy Reid has his rookie year. So does Donovan McNabb at the end of the season. 2000, the pickle juice game starts the year. They onside kick. They make the playoffs. And they actually go to the playoffs and win a playoff game. The next year, they go again. They win a division. They win a playoff game, and then they lose. This was the year. It was all set up. Year 4 of McNabb. Year 4 of Andy Reid. They are the best team in football that year, without question. They get to play Tampa Bay again in the playoffs, a team that they had beaten twice already in the postseason and had dominated. This city was so ready to win that Super Bowl. That was so elusive. And honestly, it was the most arrogant the city of Philadelphia fan base has ever been about a team. That Eagles team could not lose. Last game in the Vet.
No, the weather was under 40 degrees,
John.
Exactly. You didn't know that?
No, I mean, this team couldn't lose. NFC Championship game that day, it was a game where I walked into a building. By the way, for the last time ever in my life, have I ever walked into a sporting event saying, my team cannot lose today. And it ruined me and it wrecked me as a fan forever. And I think that year encapsulates for me sports fandom. But the idea that you're going to win something big. It's going to be the moment you've always dreamed of. And to have it yanked away from you in the last game at the Vet, in a year where you thought, this is our third year in a row in the playoffs. We've won playoff games each of these years. This is it. We're ready to take that next step. And it didn't happen. I think it created deep wounds that have never healed for Andy Reid's reputation and also for this fan base. I think it encapsulated everything about Philly. We went from massive euphoria that Sunday morning to a depression that I think carried over years past.
So you've already accidentally touched on all my talking points.
I'm terrible.
Because my answer to that question is a little bit more broad to where you were specific, but it's the Andy Reid, Donovan McNabb Eagles. And because you touched on the generational thing too, that's what I meant. When I was growing up, I'm like the youngest person that remembers Ray Rhodes.
Okay, right.
I was a little kid and people said he was bad when he got fired. What I really know as the Eagles is Andy Reid drafting Donovan McNabb and that era coming into form. And you know what? I thought you were supposed to make the NFC Championship game every year. I didn't learn I was wrong until that whole mess with T.O. 2005, I guess that was.
5.
But I think in the back of my head, I thought that that's how it worked. The Eagles go on a deep playoff run every year.
Well, that's why I say to you guys, I believe the kids of your generation, the youngsters and the young people now that are maybe in their 20s and 30s, have lived a life of silver spoon Philadelphia fandom, where for the most part, except for the wretched run where the 76ers were losing on purpose, thinking that they were outsmarting the whole league. By the way, they didn't. To me, you guys have lived through a pretty good time. 5 consecutive division titles with the Phillies and a world championship, and then the Phillies getting back on the horse after a distinct down period. But they weren't terrible except for a few of those years. And then to be back in another glorious era of Phillies baseball. The Eagles have never really dropped off. Even every time they change coaches, the coach makes the playoffs their first year.
1 year at a time they dropped off, but
right.
no prolonged.
Losing. And so for me, you guys have grown up in a different Philadelphia. That's why, and I think it's a good thing, that's why the fan base is a nicer fan base than it was. That's why I think it's gone too nice, by the way. I think that's why this fan base has become more acceptable, where it's not as nasty to go to the Link. It's nothing like going to Veterans Stadium. Veterans Stadium was a hellhole. And to go to the Link, some days it's like going to a mall. I mean, it's a completely different experience, fan experience in this town.
Make a lot of good points here, John. It goes into the psychology of Philadelphia fandom. It's a very deep conversation.
It is. And look, can you admit to me that your Monday is going to be better when the Eagles won?
Sure.
It's like the whole town.
I actually wrote something pretty extensive a couple years ago. It started as best Eagles regular season memories. So I couldn't justify putting one game on the list, but I felt so strongly about it personally. It was the year Chip Kelly got fired. The team is an absolute mess. They go up to New England and get in a 14-point hole against Tom Brady and a team that's in the top tier of the NFL. They had zero chance of winning that game, and they somehow reeled off 5 consecutive touchdowns. When they went down 14-0 in that game, it was one of the worst moments in my life with no hope for the Eagles to win. When I woke up the next day, it was a completely different feeling and mentality to go to work. So that's my microcosm of the attitude that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it affects everything. I know this, is that some days before work, and obviously we're going to work early with the morning show, you'll roll into the Wawa here, right down the street from our radio station, and it'll be 4:30 in the morning.
You'll have a hard time parking even at 4:30.
Yeah, that can sometimes be a bit of a hassle. But it's amazing to me that the person you pass going in the door, go Birds. I'll be wearing something Eagles because it's a Monday. Go Birds. Hey, what's up? Hey, how you doing? Great game yesterday, right? And it is an obsession for this city that I think is an awesome thing, because overall, though there are some negativity that is surrounding the Eagles fan base, the positivity that surrounds this community, especially when the Eagles are good, or a red October for the Phillies, I think it's transformational, and I think it's very psychological. It changes this entire town. Crime went down the last 2 Octobers drastically during Red October. Why? I think the criminals were all watching the Phillies games, just like we were. They were all, look at United people. When the Eagles are better, crime is down. Like, it's weird. It's like there's strange things. There's things that unify a city, and I think it's part of it.
I remember at Fanatic Fan Fest in 2022 when the Phillies, I think Game 1 of the World Series was the night before.
And they won the Friday night game in Houston.
The crime rate is way down in the city. People are stunned that, wow, we care that much about Philadelphia sports.
Well, I think we get distracted. I said, whether you're a law-abiding citizen, whether you're a criminal, whether whoever you are, I think it's one thing that look, we're always looking for things in today's day and age. So many things are orchestrated to divide us. Whether it's mainstream media, whether it's whatever, they seek out ways to make you pick a side. They're trying to divide us. And something like sports can bring together an entire city. And you hear that sometimes, and it's a cliche. Not if you live in Philly. It's not. It's not a cliche. When your grandmother, your mom, your sister, your brother, I was saying the other night, I traded 42 texts with my daughter during the Friday Night Football opener. My daughter's 20 and a senior at Temple. It brings a tear to my eye as a father that we're sharing that obsession and that I passed it on to her and she loves it that much. And I realize with that comes heartache, though, and some pain. And I gave that to her, too. But she's already seen a Super Bowl, so I don't feel that sorry for her.
Well, John, last but certainly not least, I've heard your story, your personal story, an admirable journey. You're a 3-time cancer survivor, no stranger to overcoming adversity. What's your message to young professionals after accomplishing so much? Because that's the audience, the demographic that's on this show is young professionals trying to take a step up, ramp up their careers.
Well, I think one thing is that do not be afraid to be persistent and a little stubborn. And you and I have had these conversations sometimes off the air as far as the idea that how much do you push? How much do you try to be a bit of a pest? I'm going to tell you that when you want to succeed in things and you want to make your next steps, you got to be aggressive. And you have to take moves, whatever business you're in. I was in the business world full-time till I was 33. I didn't become a full-time sports talk radio host till I was 33 years old. And within 4 years, I was hosting my own show on ESPN Radio, filling in for Colin Cowherd, filling in for Dan Patrick, and things happen. I think what comes up today for young professionals and young people, especially in our business, they look at something as, I just got my college degree. Well, now the gates should be open for me. The job should be there. Everything should work out like that. My story should be really sort of a blueprint for people. I worked part-time in this industry until I was 33, and then everything came together. There's not a clock. It's not an hourglass where the sands are falling out of it, that you have to be somewhere by 28, have to have this job by 30. I'm a perfect example. That's not true. But what you've got to be is you've got to be singularly focused on the things that you're doing are advancing the football every day, that you're doing things that are raising your profile, raising your skill set. And that also, Herm Edwards said it about the best ability is availability. You have to be willing to say, you know what? I could go out drinking on Friday night, or maybe I'm going to work at the radio station and do something. Or maybe I've got a chance to cover high school football because I want to be a writer. And they want me to cover high school football games on a Friday night while my friends are all going out and partying. Understanding that is maybe not going to be the most desirable path for your fun, but the best path for your future is completely a lesson that everybody has to learn.
Well, John, thanks so much for taking all this time for us. So many great talking points
Anytime,
during
brother.
this short interview. What a job by John Kincade there. That's Cardinal O'Hara's finest, John Kincade. He just gave us so much great insight, especially with his points on the generations of Philadelphia sports fans. Things have changed and they've stayed the same. He just articulated what that really means to this city with the same mentality that you think about with Philadelphia sports fans, except with a different set of circumstances. And it cracks me up that he says the silver spoon generation. And also, one more thing, I forgot to let John plug his content at the end, but I'm sure you already know it anyway. listen to 97.5 The Fanatic to hear him on Kincade and Salciunas. That's 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on weekdays. You get that on YouTube. You get it on the stream, the Fanatic app. Plenty of ways to listen to Kincade and Salciunas. But that's going to do it for First Time, Long Time. I'm Colin Newby of 97.5 The Fanatic and 93.3 WMMR, and we'll talk next week.